All right, next part that we are going to be discussing is functions. We're going to be working a little bit more with functions and understanding how they work specifically in JavaScript. Now, when it comes to functions in JavaScript, it's a little bit more flexible. The reason I say that will come apparent in a moment when I start showing you the examples. But basically, functions are one of the fundamental building blocks in JavaScript. A function in JavaScript is similar to a procedure or a set of statements that perform a task or calculate a value. But for a procedure to qualify as a function, it should take some input and return an output where there is some obvious relationship between the input and the output. So to use a function, you must define it somewhere in the scope from which you wish to call it. All right. So to quickly show a simple example, right? When we say that a function is a procedure, it basically would look something like this. So it's very important that you remember the syntax as well. It's always the keyword function. That's something that we need in JavaScript. You need to specify the keyword function to say that what you are creating is a function or what you are declaring is a function, right? So you specify the keyword function and then you can give it a name. In this case, I'm just going to give it a name test, right? And then we have our brackets to specify if we want any parameters, right? And then also it is followed by our two curly braces, which just specify the body. Now, in here, we can then technically have multiple things that then execute when the function is called. So for now, I'm just going to say console.log and then just say this. Sorry, we'll say this is a new function, right? Now, this will only execute now if we have, or if we call the function, right? In this example, like I said, we've only specified that we have created a function, we've given it a name and a body so that it needs to then execute whatever's inside of the body when we do then execute or call this specific function. So in this example, for instance, when we now refresh the page, right? It's important to remember that because we haven't called the function, nothing is going to execute in the browser. So you'll see even if I refresh it, nothing then actually shows up inside of our console. That's because we haven't actually called the function, we've only declared it. So now if we want to call it, it's very simple. We just specify the name followed by the parameters of the function. And then when we then refresh it inside the browser, you'll see that it executes whatever's inside the body. And in this case, it's a console.log. So print to the console the message that we have specified. All right. Now, what I meant by a procedure in JavaScript is exactly what we have created here. So the reason they call it a procedure is because there are no parameters inside of the function and there's also no return to the function. So technically what's happening here is we're just calling a specific procedure that's being executed line by line. Then it continues whenever the procedure is done. All right. Now, as soon as we start adding parameters and a return to the specific function, it then actually turns into a proper function, right? Now, I guess you could call a procedure a function and a function a procedure if you want to. But the big difference in using these terms are the parameters and the return keyword inside of the function exactly, all right? So if a function does not have parameters or a return keyword in its body, then I guess you could call it a procedure. It's just a different naming convention, I guess. But if it does have parameters inside of its brackets or a return function in the body of the function, then it would most likely just be called a function and not a procedure. Right, so like I said, with functions, we can add in parameters that we want. We don't necessarily have to keep it empty. We can say that we want number 1. And then also, if we want to add multiple parameters, we just separate them with the comma. And then we can say number 2 like so. Now, it's important that we have to remember if the function then has 2 parameters, we need to also specify those parameters as well. So in here, what I want to show you guys is the difference in how functions work for JavaScript versus C#. With C#, you guys will remember that whenever we specify a specific type for the function, right? Like for instance, the function is a Boolean type or an integer type, then we will always need to return that specific value, right? So if the the function was a Boolean type, we'd have to return a Boolean to the function. And if it was an integer type, we would have had to return an integer type in the function as well. Now, inside of JavaScript, we don't have to specify those things, and that's mainly because of the type conversion that takes place automatically in JavaScript. So here, for instance, we can actually return anything that we want. We can return a Boolean, an integer, a string, whatever it is we want to return, we can return, right? So for instance, what I'm going to do here is I am going to use the two parameters, right? And I am going to say number 1, and then I'm gonna add plus, and then we'll just say number 2, like so, all right? And then I guess we can technically return anything we want. Let's return a number. So I'm gonna say number 1 plus number 2, like so. And now we can give it 2 values. So let's say 2 and 5. All right. Now, when we execute this in the browser, you'll see that the function executes as normal, and it prints to the console the 2 numbers that we've added, but nothing really happens to the return value. The reason for that is because this return value is now stored inside of this function call. So what we can do is we can also print this return value to the console, either by just printing it to the console or by storing it into a variable. So what I'm going to do first off is I'm going to create a temporary number variable. So I'm going to call it result, and then assign it equal to this value, just like so. And then we're going to say console.log, and then we're going to print the result to the console, just like so. So now if you press refresh, you'll notice that the value that we get out of it is 7. But also, we don't have to store it inside of a variable. We can just simply call it inside of the function like so, and then we will get these 2 values as well. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to remove that one, and then I'm going to remove this one, okay? And then we'll print it to the console, and then you'll see it gives us the result when we return the value inside of the 2 functions.
Thank you for watching. Want to learn more coding and programming tips? Check out our website, like and subscribe to our channel for more videos. Check you there.